He did not go back to the office to check on her. He went back because the safe on the 9th floor held the only complete draft of an agreement worth $11 million, and Emeric Castor had never once in his life trusted a document he could not put his hands on. It was past midnight on a Thursday, and the woman who had never left that building before he did had not answered a single call since morning. When he pushed open the door to the outer office, expecting nothing but dark glass and a cold desk, the lamp was still burning, and something on the floor caught the light in a way that floors do not. What he found under that lamp did not simply end the alliance he had spent 2 years building, it ended the man he had been while he built it. The private room above the Ardmore Club smelled of scorched butter and old cigars, and Emeric Castor had been breathing it for 3 hours. He sat at the head of a table long enough to seat 14, with 9 of the chairs filled, and the rest left empty in the deliberate way that men in his position left things empty, so that everyone present understood who had not been invited. A waiter moved along the wall with a bottle wrapped in white linen, refilling glasses that nobody had touched. The chandelier above the table was the sort of thing that cost more than a house and threw less light than a street lamp, and under it every face looked slightly yellow, slightly ill, slightly like a photograph left too long in a window. Emeric had not eaten. His plate had been cleared and replaced twice, and both times the food had gone back to the kitchen untouched, and both times the waiter had said nothing about it, because the waiter had worked at the Ardmore for 19 years and knew exactly which men to leave alone. "You are frowning," Cecily Renard said. She sat at his right hand, which was where the arrangement put her, and she had the good posture of a woman who had been corrected for slouching until correction became unnecessary. Her hair was the color of dark honey and pinned so precisely that it looked less like hair than like something engineered. She wore gray. She always wore gray, in 9 different shades of it, and Emeric had come to understand over the past 2 years that this was not a preference, but a message, delivered daily, to anyone who might mistake her for decorative. "I am listening," he said. "You are doing both." She turned her water glass a quarter turn on the tablecloth without drinking from it. "My father is watching you frown. He will decide it means something." "Does it?" "That is precisely the question he will spend the drive home asking himself." She smiled, briefly, and it did not touch anything above her cheekbones. "Try to be duller, Emeric. Dull men close deals." At the far end of the table, Osric Renard was telling a story about a shipment of Portuguese marble that had gone missing in 79, and the 4 men nearest him were laughing in the particular rhythm of people laughing at a story they had already heard. Osric had a voice built for rooms like this, warm and slow and entirely without hurry, and Emeric had learned within a month of meeting him that the warmth was a fixture, like the chandelier, and told you nothing whatsoever about what was underneath it. The agreement between them ran to 61 pages. It merged the Renard trucking concerns with the Castor freight terminals along the North Quay, and it would make both families very difficult to remove from the city, and it had taken 2 years of dinners exactly like this one to bring within reach of a signature. Nobody at the table had ever said the word marriage aloud. Nobody needed to. Thessaly sat at his right hand and would keep sitting there, and in 18 months or so a church would be booked, and the whole city would understand that the arrangement had hardened into something with a legal shape. Emeric did not love her. She did not love him. They had discussed this exactly once, on a balcony in February, with the honesty of 2 people negotiating a lease, and had both come away satisfied. He reached for his own glass and found it already full. "Your brother is late," Thessaly said. "My brother is always late. He was late to my father's birthday. He was late to the Callahan funeral." She lifted one shoulder a fraction of an inch. At some point, lateness stops being a habit and starts being an opinion. Emeric let that pass, because she was not wrong, and because saying so at this table would have cost him something. Ivo arrived 20 minutes later, with rain on the shoulders of his coat, and an apology already assembled on his face. He was 4 years younger than Emeric, and had inherited all of the charm their father had failed to distribute evenly. And he moved down the length of the table, shaking hands and touching elbows and saying the right names in the right order, until he reached his seat, and by the time he sat down the whole room liked him again. "Traffic on the causeway," he said, dropping into the chair. "There's a barge stuck under the lift bridge, and half the district is trying to go around it." "For 3 hours," Emeric said. "For a while." Ivo grinned and reached for the bread. "Did I miss anything expensive?" That was the moment. Emeric would go back over the evening later, many times, standing at windows and sitting in cars and lying awake, and every time he went back over it, he would stop here, on this exact half-second, and hate himself with a precision that never dulled. Because he took out his phone. He did it without thinking about it. He did it the way a man checks a watch, out of some low animal need to confirm that the world was still running along the lines he had drawn for it. And the screen showed him what it had shown him at 7, and again at 9, and again at 10:30. Nothing. No message. No confirmation. No brief line of text, correctly punctuated, telling him that the Brannock invoices had been reconciled and the 9th floor was locked and she was going home. Undine Fell had sent him that message, or a message very much like it, every working night for 4 years. She had sent it from the hospital, the night her appendix came out. She had sent it during a citywide power failure, from a phone she had charged in a car, and had included an apology for the delay of 9 minutes. She had sent it on Christmas Eve, and on the night the North warehouse burned, and on the night his father died, and on that last one, it had said only that the 9th floor was locked, and that she was sorry, and he had never answered it, and he had never thought about it again until now. He turned the phone face down on the tablecloth. "Something wrong?" Ivo asked. "Through the bread?" "No," Emeric said. 9 words into the lie, he already knew it was one. He had hired her on a Tuesday in a bad year. The firm they used for corporate filings had sent her over as a temporary replacement, and she had come into an office where the previous occupant had left in an ambulance, and she had sat down at a desk stacked with 3 months of unfiled harbor manifests and asked exactly one question, which was whether he preferred documents sorted by vessel or by date. He had said, by date. She had said that by vessel would take her 2 days longer and would save him roughly 6 hours a week for the rest of his life, and had then waited, without any visible investment in the outcome, for him to make up his mind. He had said, by vessel. She had been 26 then, and she had looked like nothing. That was the only way he had ever been able to describe it, and he had never said it aloud to anyone, because it sounded cruel and was not meant to be. She was of ordinary height and ordinary build, with brown hair she kept pinned back, and shoes chosen for standing rather than for looking at, and she had a face that people forgot on the walk to the elevator. In his business, that was worth more than a gun. She had walked past federal surveillance for 4 years, and not one photograph of her had ever been flagged, because nothing about her invited a second look, and she had understood this about herself early and had turned it into a trade. She knew how he took his coffee, which was black and hot enough to be a small act of violence. She knew which of the harbor inspectors would take money, which would take tickets to a game and consider it different, and which would take nothing and had to be managed a longer way around. She knew the alarm code for the 9th floor, the combination for the wall safe behind the credenza, and the 4 separate places where the ledgers that were not real were kept, so that anyone who broke in would find them and stop looking. 2 winters ago, 3 men from the Brannock organization had come up to the 9th floor without an appointment and had stood in his outer office arranging themselves the way men do when they intend to be looked at. Emeric had been on a call. Through the glass, he had watched Undine come out of the file room with an armful of folders, walk directly into the middle of them, set the folders down on the corner of her desk, and ask the largest of the 3, very politely, whether he would mind moving because he was standing on the cord and she needed to run the shredder. The man had moved. She had not looked up when they left. He had asked her afterwards out of genuine curiosity whether she had been frightened, and she had said that she had been extremely frightened, and that she had found the best method was to give her hands something to do that had nothing to do with the men in the room. Then she had asked whether he wanted the Brannock file pulled, and he had said yes, and that had been the end of it. She was 30 now. She still had the same shoes. He had noticed that once, in an elevator, and had assumed it meant she was sentimental about them. On Tuesday she had come into his office to have 3 letters signed, and she had stood at the far side of the desk holding the folder the way she always did. And Emmerich had glanced up and had seen that the knuckles of her right hand were split across 2 fingers and had gone a bad color. He had asked, she had said the drawer of the map cabinet had come off its runner and caught her hand, and that she had already called the building people about it. And he had accepted that because the Renard agreement was at 61 pages and going to 64, and because a map cabinet is exactly the kind of thing that catches a hand, and because it was easier than the alternative, which was to look at the woman standing in front of him and ask a second question. He had signed the letters. She had taken them away. That had been 3 days ago, and he had not thought about her hand since, and now he was sitting under a chandelier, in a room full of men he intended to sign a contract with, and it was 10 minutes to midnight, and Ondine Fell had not sent a message in 17 hours. He pushed his chair back. The sound of it carried further than he expected. At the far end of the table, Osric Renard stopped in the middle of a sentence about marble, and looked up, and the 4 men around him looked up, and the waiter along the wall stopped with the bottle half raised. "Emmerich," Thessaly said quietly, "I have to go back to the building. You have to sit down. There is a problem with the 9th floor." He was already reaching for his coat, which the waiter had hung on a stand near the door, and which the waiter now handed to him with a small bow that Emmerich did not see. She did it smoothly, so that to anyone watching from the far end of the table, it looked like a couple standing together, and only Emmerich, at this distance, could see what her mouth was doing. "My father has been at this table for 3 hours, she said, under the noise of the room. "He flew back from Lisbon for it. What is on the 9th floor? My assistant has not checked in since this morning." Thessaly looked at him. He watched something behind her eyes finish a small calculation and arrive at a conclusion, and he watched her decide that the conclusion was not worth the trouble of confirming. "Then she has quit," she said. "Or she is unwell, or she has found somewhere that pays her better, or she is sitting in a bar somewhere feeling underappreciated. Emmerich, there is a woman in my father's office who has been there since before I was born. Twice a year, she becomes impossible. It is not an emergency. It is a Thursday. She has the alarm codes. Then change the alarm codes." "She has the codes," Emmerich said. "The safe combination, 4 years of correspondence I never wrote down anywhere else, and the names of every man on the North Quay who takes money from me and what he takes it for." He pulled the coat on and did not look at her while he did it. "If she is gone, then either somebody has bought her or somebody has taken her. There is no third thing." "There is absolutely a third thing," Thessaly said. "The third thing is that she is a secretary and she is tired." He stopped, with one arm in the sleeve. He looked at her properly for what he later understood was the first time in about a year. She was extremely beautiful under the yellow light, and her posture was perfect, and there was not one thing about her that was not exactly where she had put it. In 2 years he had never seen her hands shake. In 2 years he had never seen her hurry. "She is not a secretary," he said. Thessaly's eyebrows rose a fraction. "She runs the 9th floor," he said. "The 9th floor runs the quay. The quay is what your father flew back from Lisbon for." That is a very generous way of describing filing. It is an accurate way of describing filing. He got the second arm into the coat. "Sit down. Tell your father the Castor terminals are not going anywhere, and neither is the agreement. I will call him in the morning. Emmerich." Her voice did not rise and did not need to. "If you walk out of this room, my father will spend the entire drive home deciding what it meant, and he will not decide it meant nothing. Then let him decide, Emmerich said, and let him be wrong. He went down the back stairs of the Ardmore Club, with his collar still turned up on one side, past a kitchen loud with steam and Portuguese, and out into an alley where the rain had started again and the cobbles held the light in long broken smears. Lorcan had the car at the mouth of the alley, with the engine running, and a cigarette going out in his hand, and he straightened when he saw who was coming, and threw the cigarette into the running gutter. Boss. The freight building? Emmerich said, and got into the back. It is gone midnight, Lorcan said, pulling out. Nobody is going to be there. Emmerich watched the wet street begin to move past the window, and thought about a woman who had once apologized for a delay of 9 minutes. That, he said, is what I am afraid of. The city at that hour had the quality of something abandoned in a hurry. Lorcan took the club district at speed, past the shuttered fronts of restaurants where men were still counting the night's money behind papered glass, and the wipers went back and forth with a small rubber complaint at the end of each stroke. Emmerich sat behind him with his phone in his hand and the screen dark, and he did not put it away, and he did not look at it, and he could not have said which of those two things was costing him more. He called her at the second set of lights. It rang 4 times and went to the recorded message, which was 14 seconds long, and gave the main switchboard and the hours the office captain nothing at all about who she was. She had recorded it in his office, standing at the window on an afternoon when the phone system had been rebuilt, and he had been signing something at the desk behind her, and had not listened. He listened, now all 14 seconds of it, and heard a voice so level and so entirely without personality that a stranger would have assumed it belonged to a machine. He hung up before the tone. He called again. He got the same 14 seconds. The causeway came up out of the dark, long and low over the black water, its lamps strung along the rail like something left over from a festival. Emmerich watched the far side approach, and felt the tires change their note as they came onto the span. There was no barge. The lift bridge stood open at the far end, with its counterweights down, and its road plates flat, and there was no barge under it, and no barge anywhere in the channel, and no cones, and no crew, and nothing at all in the water but the rain coming down onto it, and the reflection of the lamps breaking apart and reassembling. Emmerich looked at the empty channel until the car was past it. He did not say anything to Lorcan. He filed it, the way he had spent his whole life filing things, in the place where he kept the small, wrong details that had not yet grown into anything, and he went back to his phone and made himself think about the hand instead. Tuesday. The folder held out across the desk, 2 knuckles split open, and the skin around them gone the color of a plum. He had asked and she had said the map cabinet, and he had accepted it, and the thing he could not now get away from, sitting in the back of a car at 1 in the morning with the rain going sideways past the window, was that he had never once walked over to look at the map cabinet. It stood 8 steps from his own door. He had been past it perhaps 40 times since Tuesday. He had not looked at it, because looking at it would have been an accusation, and he had not wanted to make one, and underneath that, further down where he did not usually go, he had not wanted to be told anything that would take 4 hours out of a week. He had already promised to a contract. She had known that about him. That was the part that turned in him like a key. She had chosen the lie carefully. A map cabinet was dull. A map cabinet had no story attached to it, nothing that invited a second question. And she had handed it to him already knowing that he would take it, because in 4 years she had learned exactly how much weight he was willing to give to anything that was not on his desk. The key district began to come up around them, and the buildings changed the way they always did, from stone to brick to the long corrugated flanks of the freight sheds. Cranes stood over the water with their arms folded down. A dog crossed the road ahead of the car without hurrying, and Lorcan slowed for it, and it did not look up. Emmerich ran it forward, because that was what he did, because a man who did not run things forward did not last in his position past his 40th year. If she had been bought, it would have been the Brannocks, and the price would have been high, And she would have had to be tired for a long time first, and he would have to sit across a table from her and find out how long, and then he would have to do the thing that came after finding out. He turned that over and found that it was heavy and that he could carry it. He had carried worse. If she had been taken, then the codes were gone, the safe was gone, the key was gone, and there would be a war before the month was out, and Osric Renard would sign nothing. There was, as he had said in the club, no third thing. He was aware, distantly, in the part of himself he had spent 38 years learning not to listen to, that he had left a table with 9 men at it, and a woman at his right hand, and an agreement 2 years in the building, and that he had done it before he had any reason to at all. He had not gone because of the codes. He had gone because a message had not arrived. He put that away too, in a different place from the barge, and he was still putting it away when Lorcan brought the car around the last corner and the freight building came up out of the rain. It was 12 floors of 1920s brick with a stone lintel over the doors and the family name cut into it, which his grandfather had paid for and his father had been faintly embarrassed by. 11 of the 12 floors were dark. On the 9th, one window was lit. "Somebody is up there," Lorcan said. "Yes," Emmerich said, and got out into the rain. The lobby doors were locked, which was correct, and he opened them with his own key, which took him 3 seconds longer than it should have because his hand was not entirely steady, and he noticed that it was not, and made a note of that as well. Inside, the lobby was warm and smelled of floor polish and wet stone, and the faint burnt dust that came off the old radiators when they had been running a long time. It was a good smell. It was the smell of the building at night, and he had known it since he was 9 years old, and it was so completely ordinary that for a moment his shoulders came down. Then he looked at the desk. Casimir was not behind it. Casimir had sat behind that desk on the night shift for 6 years, in a chair he had brought in himself because the building chair hurt his back, and he was not in it. His coat was over the back of it. His radio lay flat on the blotter with the little green charge light showing. There was a mug beside the radio with an inch of tea in the bottom, and the tea had gone the color tea goes when it has been standing for most of a day. The visitor's book lay open at the day's page. Emmerich turned it around with one finger. Undine Fell had signed in at 6:50 in the morning, in the small upright hand he had seen on 10,000 documents, and she had not signed out. Below her name there were 3 deliveries and a man from the lift maintenance company, and all 4 of them had signed out again. The last entry on the page was the maintenance man at 2:20 in the afternoon. Nothing after that. 11 hours of nothing. Emmerich stood with his hand flat on the page and listened to the building. The radiators ticked. Somewhere far above him a fan turned over in a duct. Under everything, there was the low sound the freight building always made, a kind of settled breathing that came up through the floor from the boiler room, and which he had never in his life noticed, until this exact moment when it was the only thing he could hear. He went to the elevator and stopped with his hand raised, and did not press it. He took the stairs. 9 floors is a long way in a coat. He went up them steadily, one hand on the rail, and by the 5th floor his breathing had gone loud in the stairwell, and he made himself slow down, because whatever was on the 9th floor was not going to be improved by his arriving out of breath. The stairlights came on ahead of him, and went off behind him, section by section, so that he climbed inside a small traveling box of light with darkness closing up at his back. The fire door to the 9th floor was propped open with a rubber wedge. That was wrong. That door was never propped. She closed it every evening, and she closed it because he had asked her to, 4 years ago, in a conversation about insurance. He put his hand against it and pushed it wide. The outer office lay in front of him in the dark, long and open, with the rain running down the tall windows on the far side, and the city smeared out behind them. Her lamp was on. It stood at the corner of her desk with its green glass shade throwing a small warm circle onto the blotter, and everything inside that circle was exactly where it always was: 2 pens, the telephone, a short stack of correspondence squared up against the edge, The rest of the room was in shadow, and the rest of the room was immaculate. That was what he could not get past, standing in the doorway. Nothing had been thrown. Nothing had been pulled out. The file room door hung open at the far end, and the drawers behind it were shut. The chairs by the window stood in their pairs. There was no mess, no wreckage, none of the loud, obvious ruin he had walked into perhaps a dozen times in his life, and had learned to read at a glance. Her coat was on the hook by the door. Her bag was under the desk, upright, with the strap folded over the top of it the way a person folds a strap when they intend to pick it up again in a minute. The kettle on the low cabinet had boiled itself dry. He could smell it from the doorway, the hot, dead smell of an element that has been on too long with nothing in it. And when he crossed the room and put the back of his hand near it, it was still faintly warm, which meant it had cut out on its own thermostat hours ago. The shredder was full. Not full in the way it was full at the end of a Friday. Full to the throat, packed so tight that the last inch of paper had jammed halfway in and stopped, and the machine had shut itself off with its red light on. Emerick stood in the middle of his own outer office at 1:20 in the morning, and understood, with a cold, clean shock, that he was reading a room in which somebody had been working very hard alone, for a long time, and had not stopped because they were finished. Her chair was pushed back from the desk at an angle, not tucked in, not fallen over. Pushed back and turned the way a chair turns when the person in it gets up quickly, and Emerick followed the line of it around the end of the desk toward the credenza and the wall safe behind it, and the lamp did not reach that far, and there was something on the floor there that the shadow was lying across. He said her name, the room took it, and gave nothing back. He crossed the 6 steps to the end of the desk, and he had his hand inside his coat, without any memory of putting it there, and then he came around the corner of the credenza and stopped. Ondine was on the floor between the credenza and the wall. She was lying on her left side with one arm folded under her, and the other stretched out ahead of her along the carpet, and her cheek was against the floor, and her eyes were closed. Her hair had come out of its pin and lay across her face in a way he had never seen it, because in 4 years he had never once seen her with her hair down. And the smallness of that detail was the thing that went through him first, before any of the rest of it registered at all. Then the rest of it registered. The right side of her face was swollen out of its own shape from the temple down to the jaw in a spread of color that had already gone through purple and was coming out the other side into green and a bad yellow. That was not from tonight. That was 3 days old at least, and it had been under powder on Tuesday, and under powder every day since, and he had stood 8 steps away from it and signed his letters. Her right hand lay palm up on the carpet. The 2 split knuckles he had seen were the smallest thing about it now. The whole hand was swollen to twice its size, and the fingers had a set to them that fingers do not naturally take, and there was a strip of white gauze wound around the base of the thumb, neat and even, tied off with a small square knot. He knew that knot. It was the same knot she used on document parcels. Emerick went down onto his knees. The carpet was cold. He put 2 fingers under the angle of her jaw and held them there, and made himself count, and the building breathed, and the rain went down the windows, and for 4 full seconds there was nothing under his fingers at all. Then there was faint and too fast and shallow as a bird's, he said. Nothing moved in her face. Her skin, when he touched it, was cold in a way the room could not account for. The room was warm. The radiators had been running all evening. She had been on this floor, in this warm room, going cold on the carpet for hours, and the lamp had been burning over her the whole time. He looked around him with his heart going like a hammer, and what he saw was worse than anything a fight would have left behind. The first aid box was on the credenza above her, closed. He reached up and opened it, and found it packed, correctly, gauze in its wrapper, scissors clipped into their slot, the tape wound back onto its own roll, with the end tucked under. 2 items were missing from it, and the box had been closed and latched afterward. She had opened it. She had taken what she needed. She had put the box back together and shut the lid, because the box lived on the credenza, and it lived closed, and then she had gone down onto the floor. There was a mug on the carpet by the credenza's foot on its side, and a dark stain, gone stiff in the pile around it. There was her telephone screen down, in the wastebasket by the desk, and when he took it out, the glass came away from the frame in his hand in 3 pieces, and the frame was bent along its length in a way that a fall onto carpet does not do to a telephone. And under her outstretched right arm, half beneath the palm of that ruined hand, held there by the weight of it, was an envelope. It was cream, business weight, from the 3rd drawer of the supply cupboard, and it was sealed. There was a dark thumb mark across one corner. She had gone down, still holding it, and her hand had come to rest on top of it, and it had stayed there under her while the hours went by. Emmerich slid it out from under her fingers, as carefully as he had ever done anything in his life. He turned it over into the lamplight. There was one word on the front of it, written in her small upright hand, and it was not his name. It said, "For Hollis." Emmerich knelt on the cold floor with the envelope in his hand, and the woman who ran his life dying on the carpet beside him. And he read that one word 4 times, and he could not put a face to it, or a voice, or a debt, or a threat. Because in 38 years in this city, on this quay, in this business, he had never, in his life, met anybody called Hollis. He did not pick her up. Every instinct he had was screaming at him to get her off the floor and into a car, and he did not do it, because the right side of her head was swollen, and the swelling ran back past her ear, and because a man he had known in his 20s had been carried down a flight of stairs by his friends with an injury like that and had never spoken again. So Emmerich Castor knelt on the carpet of his own outer office and made the hardest decision of his life, which was to leave her exactly where she was. He took off his coat and laid it over her, tucking it under her arm and down along her back. Then he called, "Lorcan, get up here. 9th floor, bring the car blanket and both bottles of water from the door pocket." "What is on the 9th floor?" "Lorcan." The line went dead. Emmerich heard the far stairwell door bang open 2 floors below him inside a minute, which meant Lorcan had run, and he was grateful for it, in a way he had no room to feel yet. He called the doctor next. Cassia Vane had been treating the Quay families for 16 years out of a private practice above a bakery, and she answered on the 2nd ring in a voice that had clearly been awake because it was always awake, because she had made a career out of a telephone that rang between midnight and dawn. "Castor Building, 9th floor," he said. "Head injury. She has been down for hours, and I do not know how many. Breathing is fast and shallow. She is cold, and the room is warm. Do not move her." "I have not." "Good." That is not a sentence I usually get. He heard a wardrobe door and keys. "Is she bleeding?" He looked. He made himself look properly, and lift the edge of his coat, and check her from the collar down the way he had checked men in cars and in loading bays, and once in the back of a church. "No," he said, and heard how strange his own voice sounded. "That is the thing. There is nothing. There is no blood anywhere in this room." "Then whatever happened to her did not happen tonight," Dr. Vane said. 20 minutes. Lorcan came through the fire door with the blanket over his shoulder and stopped and said something very quietly in a language his grandmother had spoken, and then he was down on the carpet on the other side of her without being told, spreading the blanket over Emmerich's coat, tucking it under, working from her feet up. "Ondine," he said. "Ondine, come on now. She has not moved since I found her." "She keeps sweets in her top drawer for my boy," Lorcan said. "To nobody. Every Friday, barley sugar in the twist wrapper. He is 6. She has never met him." Emmerich did not answer that, because there was no answer to it, and because he had not known it, and because it was the 4th thing in 1 hour he had not known about a woman who had sat outside his door for 4 years. "Go down to the sub-basement," he said. "Casimir is not at his desk, and his coat is on his chair. Start at the boiler room and work out." Lorcan went. And Emmerich was alone with her again, in the small, warm circle of the lamp, with the rain going down the black windows, and the envelope in his hand. He looked at it for a long time. He was aware, holding it, that opening it would be the second worst thing he had done that night, and that he had already done the worst thing, which was to accept a story about a map cabinet from a woman with a plum-colored bruise under her powder. So he ran his thumb under the flap and broke the seal, and took out what was inside, and there were 2 sheets, both folded in 3, and he unfolded the first one under the green glass shade. It was typed. Of course it was typed. She had typed it on the machine in the file room, the old electric one they kept for documents that were not to exist on any computer in the building, and she had typed it with a broken right hand, and he could see where she had let a letter fall short and had gone back over it and struck it twice. There was no greeting. It began, "You have asked me 3 times now, and I am going to answer you once." He read it standing, and then he read it, sitting on the floor with his back against the credenza, and his shoulders 6 inches from her hair, and when he had finished the first page, he read it a second time from the top, because the first reading had gone through him like weather, and he had retained almost nothing except a rising sound in his own ears. It was an inventory. That was the thing about it. It was not a confession, and it was not a plea, and it was not a warning. It was an inventory, itemized, dated, with a running total at the foot of the column, prepared in the exact format she used for the quarterly haulage returns, and it listed 11 separate movements of money out of the Castor freight accounts across 14 months, each one under the ceiling that would have triggered a second signature dot, each one routed through a haulage clearing account, and every single one of those accounts belonged to Renard. 14 months, 2 years of dinners, 61 pages of contract. Underneath the column, she had typed a single line of commentary, and it was so completely her that it hurt to look at the pattern. Is visible only if you sort by carrier and not by date. I have said this before about other things. He sat on the floor of his own office and laughed. Once, and it came out of him wrong. Then he read the last paragraph on the page and stopped laughing. It said, "I know what you are going to say. You are going to say that he has never once looked at the carrier column in 4 years, and that he is not going to start now. You are right. He is not going to start now. That is what you have been counting on, and it is a reasonable thing to count on, and I have counted on it too, for longer than you have, and for different reasons." He turned the sheet over. The back was blank. He picked up the second sheet, and he had it half unfolded, with the first line of it already coming up into the light, when Undine fell, made a sound. It was very small. It was the sound a person makes turning over in a bed, and it was the first thing she had done in 3/4 of an hour, and Emmerich dropped the letter and got both hands under his coat, to her shoulder and her cold cheek, and said her name twice. Her eyelids came apart, perhaps a third of the way. She looked at nothing. Her eyes went across the ceiling and across the underside of the desk, and found him, and did not focus, and there was a long moment in which he could see her trying to assemble the room, out of pieces that would not fit together. "Do not talk," he said. "The doctor is coming up the stairs. Do not talk." Her mouth moved. He put his ear down close to it. "Kettle," she said. He held very still. "The kettle is off," he said. "It turned itself off. It is fine." Her eyes closed again and something in her forehead let go, and she was gone before Dr. Vane's footsteps reached the 9th floor. Emmerich knelt over her with his hands shaking and understood that she had been lying on this carpet for 11 hours, cold, with her skull swelling and her hand broken in 6 places, and that the first conscious thought she had been able to form was that she had left an appliance on. He picked the second sheet up off the carpet, folded it back into the envelope with the first, and put the envelope inside his jacket against his chest, and he did not read it, and he told himself that it was because the doctor was at the door. That was not entirely true, and he knew it, and he let himself have it anyway. Dr. Cassia Vane worked for 40 minutes without saying anything. That was not an instruction. She was a short, square woman in her 50s, with reading glasses pushed up into gray hair, and she came in with a canvas bag and a folding board under her arm. And she did not ask a single question about what had happened, which was the entire reason the Quay families used her. She put a light in Ondine's eyes. She put a line into the back of her left hand and hung the bag from the handle of the file room door, because there was nothing else at the right height, and Lorcan stood and held it up for 20 minutes without being asked and did not complain. Doc Casimir was alive. Lorcan had found him in the sub-basement corridor behind the boiler, on his side, with his wrist fastened behind him with a plastic tie and a dressing gown cord around his ankles that had come off a hook in the janitor's room. He had been there since the middle of the afternoon. He had not seen anything. He had been coming back from the plant room, and there had been a step behind him, and then there had been the floor. And after that there had been 11 hours of concrete and the sound of the boiler. He had said one thing worth having. He had said that the service lift had been running. He had heard it going up and down through the wall, more than once, over a long period, and the service lift was on a separate key, and there were 3 of those keys in existence, and Emmerich had one of them. "She is not going to die tonight," Dr. Vane said at last. She said it, sitting back on her heels, stripping her gloves, and she said it flatly and without any decoration at all, and Emmerich found that he had to put one hand on the edge of the credenza, say the rest of it. "The head is the part I care about. There is a concussion, and there is swelling, and I want a scan on her within the hour, which means the private wing on Salter Row, and it means you pay cash, and it means I go with her." She began packing the canvas bag without looking at it. She is severely dehydrated. Her core temperature is 4 degrees down. She has not eaten in a number of days that I would rather establish from her than guess at. Days. Her stomach has the tone of somebody who has been running on tea. Vane looked up. "Now the hand." "The map cabinet," Emmerich said. "No," Vane said. "Come here." He came and crouched where she pointed, and she took Ondine's swollen right hand and turned it in the lamplight with a gentleness that belonged to some other woman entirely. "4 of these are old, 6 days, maybe 7. And they are the wrong bones." She traced the line without touching. When a hand is caught in a drawer, the damage runs across the fingers, because the fingers are what is in the way. This runs along the back of the hand into the wrist. That happens when a hand is flat on a surface, and something comes down on it, once, and then again in the same place. And these 2 knuckles are separate and newer, 3 days, and those are from a hand that was closed, which means that at some point after the first thing she hit something with it. The room was very quiet. "Somebody held her hand down on a table," Emmerich said. "Somebody held her hand down on a table." Vane laid it back on the blanket, and then she went home, and she strapped it herself, and she strapped it well. And then she came back to work for 6 days. Emmerich stood up. He walked 8 steps across his own outer office, past the desk where 2 pens lay squared up beside a telephone, and stopped in front of the map cabinet. He put his hand on the long, shallow drawer at the top and pulled it. It came out on its runners, smooth and true and silent, all the way to its stop, and sat there level and open in front of him, with the harbor charts inside it, undisturbed, and a little gray line of dust along the back edge where nobody had reached for anything in months. He closed it again. "Doctor," he said, without turning round, "how long have you known her?" There was a pause behind him of exactly the wrong length. 2 years, Cassia Vane said. "She has been to my rooms 3 times. I assumed you sent her? Somebody in this organization sent her the first time, because she came with the introduction. And I did not ask, because I never ask. Who sent her? I do not know. She came alone. But she paid cash all 3 times, Mr. Castor. And the first time she came, the injury I treated was on the same hand." He stood in front of a map cabinet that had never in its life caught anybody's hand, and let that arrive. Then he took out his telephone and called Osric Renard. It was 3:10 in the morning, and Osric answered on the fifth ring in the thick voice of a man who had been at a long dinner and had gone to bed on it. And Emmerich did not wait for the greeting. "It is Castor, Emmerich." A rustle, a lamp switch, the sound of a man sitting up and choosing his footing. "It is the middle of the night. 14 months, Emmerich said. 11 movements, all of them under 60,000, so they cleared on one signature. All of them out through a haulage clearing account, and every one of those accounts has your name behind it. At the third level down, silence. It went on long enough to be an answer, and then it went on longer than that, and Emmerich stood at the black window, with the rain on the far side of the glass, and listened to a man 3 miles away deciding which version of himself to be. "Where did you get that?" Osric said. "From my filing." "Emmerich, listen to me carefully, because you are about to do something extremely expensive." Osric Renard's voice had come all the way awake now, warm and slow and entirely without hurry. The voice from the end of the table, the voice that told you nothing. Money moves. Money moves through structures, and structures have names on them. And if you have been handed a column of figures by somebody at 3 in the morning, then the only question that matters is who handed it to you and what they want. 61 pages, Emmerich said. 2 years, 61 pages, and every one of them was written while you were taking money off the North Key with one hand and shaking mine with the other. You do not know that. No, Emmerich said. I do not. I know 11 line items and a routing structure, and I know that a woman who has never once been wrong about a number in 4 years typed them with a broken hand. That is not proof. I am aware that it is not proof. Then be a grown man about it and bring it to me in daylight. There is no daylight, Emmerich said. There is no agreement. There is no arrangement between our houses. Tell your daughter that she is free, and tell her that it was nothing she did, because it was nothing she did. He turned from the window, and Osric, if any part of this reaches back to my building, if one truck of yours comes onto my quay, if I find that any man of yours has been up on my 9th floor, then everything we have built in 2 years I will take apart in 1 week, and I will not be careful about it. You are throwing away $11 million over a secretary. I am canceling a business arrangement, Emmerich said, over a column. He ended the call. He walked back across the office, past the map cabinet, and crouched at the credenza a foot from where she lay, and turned the dial of the wall safe through a combination she had chosen for him 3 years ago because the one he had picked was his own birthday. It opened on the second try. Inside, on top of everything else, squared against the back panel, sat the 61-page draft, waiting for a signature that had been 4 days away. He did not tear it up. Tearing it up would have been something to watch. He fed it into the shredder instead, and the shredder was packed to the throat and jammed, and did not take it, and Emmerich stood there for a second, with a 2-year alliance, half swallowed by a machine that had already choked itself on somebody else's work. Then he left it hanging there, and went to carry Ondine down the stairs. The private wing on Salter Row was 3 floors of white corridor above a dental practice, and it smelled of nothing at all. That was the thing Emmerich could not get used to. Every room he had ever waited in had smelled of something. The freight building smelled of polish and radiator dust. The club smelled of scorched butter. This place had been scrubbed of every particular, until the air itself was anonymous, and he sat in it from 4 in the morning until the sun came up in a plastic chair in a corridor, with his coat over his knees and his shirt cuffs still dark at the edges. They took her for the scan at 4:20. They brought her back at 5:10 and put her in a room with a window facing east, and Dr. Vane came out and said one word, which was clean, and Emmerich discovered that he had been holding an entire night in his shoulders. She woke at 8. He knew, because he was in the doorway when it happened. Her eyes opened, and traveled the ceiling, and found the window and stayed there a while, and then came around the room, and stopped on him, and this time they focused, and he watched 4 years of professional distance try to assemble itself across her face and fail because she did not have the strength for it. "Do not sit up," he said. She sat up. She got about a third of the way, and her breath went out of her, and she stopped. And she stayed there, propped on her good elbow, with her hair down around her face, and looked at him with an expression he had never seen on her in his life. "What time is it?" 8 in the morning Friday. Friday. She closed her eyes. The Brannock invoices. Ondine. There is a reconciliation due on the Brannock invoices, and if it does not go across before the close of business today, then they will have a written reason to hold the 16th birth for another quarter. And if they hold the 16th birth, then in November, you will not be able to." She stopped. She had gone gray. "You will not be able to. Lie down, I need my desk." "Your desk," Emmerich said, "is 9 floors above a room where you were on the carpet for 11 hours. "Yes," she said. "I am aware I was there." And that was so entirely her. So flat and so unimpressed and so completely without any interest in being cared for, that Emmerich had to turn and look at the window for a moment. When he turned back, she was watching his jacket, not his face. His jacket, at the left side, where the shape of an envelope showed against the lining, and he saw the exact instant she recognized the outline of her own stationery, and he watched everything in her go still, in a way that had nothing to do with her injuries. "Give it to me," she said. "No. Emmerich." Her voice was thin and it did not carry, and it was the first time in 4 years she had used his name without anything attached to the front of it. "Give me the envelope." The room went very quiet. "How much of it?" she said. "The first page. And the second." "No." She let her head go back against the pillow and shut her eyes, and something came out of her that was not quite a breath, and he could not tell for the life of him whether it was relief. "Good," she said. "Do not, Ondine. Burn the second page, do not read it. Burn it, and then we will have a conversation about births." Her eyes came open. They were wet, and she was furious about it, and she looked away from him at the window so that he would not have it. "That letter was not for you, I know," he said. "It says so on the front. Then you understand." "I understand that a woman, with a hand broken in 6 places, typed 11 line items on a machine that does not connect to anything, and put them in an envelope addressed to somebody I have never heard of." He came and stood at the end of the bed. "So no, I do not understand. Who is Hollis?" She did not answer. "Somebody came up to the 9th floor yesterday afternoon, on the service lift. Somebody put Casimir behind the boiler and left him there for 11 hours. Somebody had already put your hand flat on a table a week ago and come down on it twice, and you came back to work for 6 days and did the invoices." His voice was not doing what he wanted it to do. "Ondine, look at me. Who is Hollis?" And Ondine fell, who had walked into the middle of 3 Brannock men and asked the largest one to move off the cord, turned her face further into the pillow so that he could not see it, and said, "Please." Emmerich stopped. In 4 years he had never heard the word out of her. She did not ask for things. She informed, and she arranged, and she anticipated. And twice a year she told him that he was wrong about something and was invariably correct, but she had never once, in 4 years, asked him for anything, and he had never noticed that until it was sitting in the room with them. He sat down on the edge of the chair beside the bed. "You are frightened of him," he said. "No." Her voice was muffled and absolutely steady. "I am frightened of what happens to you when you find out. I have been frightened of it for 2 years. I have organized my entire life around it. And you have just canceled $11 million in the middle of the night on the strength of 1 page, which is exactly what I was trying to stop, and you did it before I could even stand up. Then tell me, and stop it properly." "It is 8:15. She turned her head back to him at last, and her eyes were dry now, and they were the eyes from the doorway 2 winters ago. "There is a meeting on the North Quay at 11 this morning." Berth 9. The old grain shed. It was arranged before. Any of this I know about it because I arranged the paperwork for it. And I know who will be there. Then I will be there. No, Ondine. Emeric, listen to me. She got a hand out from under the blanket, the left one, the whole one, and she got it around his wrist, and her grip was nothing at all. And he could not have moved his arm for anything in the world. That meeting is not a trap for you. It was never a trap for you. If you walk into that shed this morning, you will make it into one, and every single thing I have paid for since Monday, I will have paid for nothing. What did you pay for? 6 days, she said. That is all it was ever going to be. I bought you 6 days. And then, whatever had been holding her upright, went out from underneath her, and she was down against the pillow, with her eyes shut and her breath going ragged, and Dr. Vane was in the doorway telling him in 4 words to get out of the room. He went as far as the corridor. He stood, in that scrubbed, anonymous air, for exactly as long as it took him to get the envelope out of his jacket, and he did not read the second page, because he had told her he would not. And there was one thing left in this, that he was going to be able to say he had done properly. But he looked at the first page again. He looked at the line at the bottom, the one about the carrier column, the one that had made him laugh on the floor of his office at 3 in the morning, and he read it a 4th time. You are going to say that he has never once looked at the carrier column in 4 years, and that he is not going to start now. The whole page was addressed to somebody who thought of Emeric Castor as he, and who had been asked 3 times, and who had known Ondine Fell for longer than 2 years. Emeric folded the sheet. At 10:30 he went down to the car. The North Quay in daylight was a wide, flat nothing of cracked concrete and standing water, with the cranes down and the gulls up and the grain shed at the end of berth 9 standing on its own, a long tin building with a roof gone orange and half the windows out. Emeric put 4 men on the outside and took Lord Cannon through the small door at the landward end. He had expected to have to wait. He did not have to wait, because there was one car parked inside the shed on the old weighbridge floor, in a wide space full of grain dust, hanging in the bars of light coming through the broken roof. And he knew the car, and he had been in the passenger seat of it perhaps 200 times. Ivo was standing beside it with his hands in his coat pockets, looking up at a hole in the roof, and he turned when the door opened, and he did not look surprised, and that was the worst part of the entire morning. You are early, Ivo said. So are you. I am always early. That is the difference between us that nobody notices. He took his hands out of his pockets and held them a little away from his sides, which was a thing men did in front of Emeric, and it was obscene to see his own brother do it. She woke up then. Yes. Good. He said it fast, and he meant it, and that was somehow worse as well. Emeric, before you say anything, you have to understand what this actually is, because there is a version in your head right now and it is wrong. They took her. The Brannocks took her. They have been leaning on the office for months, and I have been trying to get out in front of it, and if I had come to you in January you would have gone to war over the North Quay before I had finished the sentence. Emeric stood in the grain dust, and let him have all of it. There was no barge, he said. Ivo stopped. Last night at the Ardmore. You were 3 hours late, and you said there was a barge stuck under the lift bridge, and half the district was going around it. I crossed the causeway at 1 in the morning. The channel was empty and the bridge was up and the road plates were flat and there had not been a barge under that bridge in a week. He watched his brother's face. You lied to a room of 9 men about traffic, Ivo. Not about anything that mattered, about traffic. That is the part I cannot get past. That is how easy it has become for you, Emeric. Casimir was behind the boiler for 11 hours. The service lift was running all afternoon. There are 3 keys. Emeric, listen to me. Her hand was already broken when I signed the letters on Tuesday, Emeric said. 6 days. Somebody put it flat on a table and came down on it twice, and then she strapped it herself and came back to work. And then she went into the file room and typed 11 line items on the machine that does not connect to anything, and she put them in an envelope and she wrote a name on the front. And he saw it. He saw it land, right across his brother's face, in the half-second, before Ivo could do anything about it. And 38 years of knowing somebody meant that half a second was plenty. Our mother, Emmerich said, was called Maren Hollis before she married our father. The grain dust turned over slowly in the light. There were 2 people in the world who ever called you by it, Emmerich said. She was one. She has been dead 15 years. So I have spent the drive out here trying to work out who the second one is, and how a woman who came to me from a filing agency on a Tuesday in a bad year already knew a name that has not been said out loud in this family since the funeral. Ivo's mouth was open slightly. You put her there, Emmerich said. 4 years ago, you put her outside my door. Yes. The word came out of him, bare and unaccompanied, and Emmerich understood that his brother had been carrying it a very long time and was in some awful way glad to be rid of it. Because you were 34 and you had the whole thing, Ivo said, and I had a title and a car and a chair at the end of the table, and I wanted to know what you were doing before you did it. That is all it was, at the start. It was not this. She was supposed to be a pair of eyes, and then, she chose you. He laughed, and there was nothing at all in it, inside 8 months. She stopped bringing me anything worth having, and I let it go, because what was I going to do? And then 2 years ago I was into the Brannocks for more than I can say out loud, and they wanted the key ledgers, and I did not have them, because I have never had them, because she has had them since her 2nd year. His voice climbed. I asked her 3 times. 3 times, Emmerich. I asked her nicely twice, and the 3rd time you put her hand on a table. I needed her to understand that it was serious. It was not the 3rd time, Emmerich said. Ivo's eyes came up. There is a doctor above a bakery on the west side who has treated her 3 times in 2 years, and the first time she walked in there, the injury was on that same hand. She paid cash. She came alone. She let a stranger set it and went back to her desk on the Monday. He let that sit in the grain dust. So do not stand in front of me and count to 3. You have been doing this to her for 2 years, and she came in every morning and put my coffee on my desk and told me nothing, and I did not notice, and neither of those things is going to stop being true. She understood in January, Emmerich said. That is why she moved everything onto the machine in the file room. She has been 6 months ahead of you the whole way and you never once noticed, because she is not a person to you. She is furniture. And Ivo Koster, standing in the wreck of his own life with grain dust turning in the light around him, made the single mistake that ended it. She is a filing clerk, he said. Emmerich did not raise his voice. He did not move toward him. Lorcan, 4 steps behind, took his hand out of his coat and put it back again, and later would say that in 9 years of driving for the family, he had never been more frightened than he was in the second after that sentence, when nothing whatsoever happened. The Brannocks are not coming this morning, Emmerich said. They have not been coming for a week. She cancelled it on Monday, from a telephone she destroyed afterwards, and then she wrote you a letter so that when you came back to the 9th floor for the ledgers, you would find it and read it and understand that everything you were about to sell had already been shredded, and that if you touched her again, the whole column went to the Harbor Commission in the morning. He watched that go in. It was insurance, he said. It was not for me. If she had not gone down on that carpet, I would never have seen it. She would have handled you herself, and I would have signed 61 pages on Monday and gone on for another 4 years, not looking at the carrier column. He took the envelope out of his jacket. Ivo's eyes went to it and stayed there. I am not going to do to you what our father would have done, Emmerich said. I have thought about it all the way out here, and I find that I do not want it, and I am not sure I could look at her afterwards. So here is what happens instead. You are going to take the midday road out of this city, and you are never going to come back onto this quay, and every account with your name at any level of it closes today. And the Brainiacs are going to be told exactly where you have gone and exactly how much you owe, and what they do about that is between you and them. You are alive. That is the whole of what I am giving you." He held the envelope out. "And you are going to take this with you and read it, because it was written for you, and because she spent 6 days and a hand on it." Ivo did not move. Then he came forward and took it, and their fingers touched. And Emmerich turned around and walked out of the grain shed into the wet gray light and did not look back once. And behind him he heard a man of 34 sit down slowly on the running board of his own car. He was at the private wing by 12:30. Ondine was sitting up. Somebody had brought her a tray she had not touched, and somebody else had brought her, from the 9th floor, at her insistence, and against every piece of advice available in the building, a folder. She had it open on the blanket. She was working through it left-handed, with a pencil. Emmerich stood in the doorway and looked at that for a while. "The Brannick reconciliation," she said, without looking up, "goes across it too? I have done it wrong twice, because I cannot hold the page down. Ondine, if you are going to tell me what happened, tell me the whole thing, because I will find out the rest anyway, and it is quicker." So he told her. He sat in the plastic chair, and he told her all of it, the barge and the map cabinet, and Cassia Vane and the shed and the running board, and he did not soften anything. And when he got to the sentence about the filing clerk, she put the pencil down and did not pick it up again. When he had finished, she was quiet for a long time. "He was 30 when your father died," she said at last. "He told me about it on the first day I met him. It was the first thing he said about himself, and he told it like a boy of 15. I have thought about it a great deal, and I have never once been able to decide whether it explains anything. Neither have I, no." She looked at her ruined hand, where it lay on the blanket. "I should have come to you in January." Yes, she looked up sharply, because she had expected the other thing, the reassurance, the absolution, and he had not given it to her. "You should have come to me in January," Emmerich said, "and I should have walked 8 steps and opened the map cabinet on Tuesday. We are going to have to live with both of those, and I would rather we did it honestly, because I have had 4 years of the other way, and it nearly killed you on a carpet." Ondine Fell looked at him. And then, for the first time since he had met her, she did not deflect. She did not reach for a berth, or an invoice, or a reconciliation due at 2. She simply sat there in a white room with her hair down and let it be true, and her chin went once, and she let that be true as well. "You never read the second page," she said. "No. Do you want to know what was on it? You told me to burn it. I know what I told you." She looked at her hands. It was 4 lines. It said that if he came back to that office a 4th time, the column went to the Harbor Commission the same morning, and that I had left instructions with somebody who did not know what they were holding, and that he was not to try and find out who, because he would not be able to, and he would only make it worse. She let out a breath, and then it said that I was sorry. It had to be me who stopped him. That was the last line. "That is why I did not want you reading it, because you were sorry for him." "Because I was sorry for him," she said, "and because you would have had to watch me be sorry for him, and I did not think either of us could carry that on top of everything else." Emmerich sat with that. "There is a 3rd page," she said. He went cold. "There were 2 sheets in the envelope? There were 2 sheets in the envelope that you found?" She reached across herself awkwardly, left-handed, to the small cabinet by the bed, and opened the drawer and took out a single folded sheet that had come in with her possessions in a plastic bag with her shoes and her hairpin. "I took this one out on Monday and did not put it back. I have carried it since. I was going to put it on your desk on the day I left. The day you left. I gave you 11 months' notice," she said. "You have simply not been told about it yet." She held it out. He unfolded it. It was typed on the same machine, and it was dated in January, and it was 14 lines long, and it did not contain a single figure. It said that she had come into his office as somebody else's arrangement and had stopped being that by the following spring, and that she had not told him, because there had been no version of the telling in which she was still at that desk on the Monday. It said that she had made a decision in her second year to hold the Quay ledgers herself rather than surrender them upward, and that she had understood at the time that this made her a liability rather than an asset, and that she had accepted the trade. It said that she was aware that everything she had done for 4 years had been done under a false start, and that she had found this unbearable in a way that had begun to affect her work, which was the only argument she considered legitimate. And the last 3 lines said that she would be leaving at the end of the year, and that she would find and train her own replacement to a standard he would not notice, and that he was to look at the carrier column at least once a quarter, and that she was sorry. There was no signature. She had typed her name. Emmerich sat with it in the plastic chair, and did not trust himself to speak. "I do not accept it," he said. "That is not how notice works. I am aware of how notice works." He folded the page along its own creases and set it on the blanket between them. "Undine, I have spent 4 years accepting things from you. I accepted the map cabinet. I accepted a voicemail with nothing of you in it. I accepted a message every night for 4 years, and I never once answered one." He put his hand flat on the folded page, not to take it, only to keep it still. "So I am not going to order you to stay, because I have found out this week what my orders are actually worth. I am going to ask you, which I have never done, and which I am doing badly." She looked at his hand on the paper. "Ask what?" she said. "Come back at the end of it, not to the desk outside my door." He looked up. "There is a room on the 9th floor with a window, and nothing in it. The carrier column is yours. The berths are yours. Everything I sign, you sign first. And if you tell me I am wrong in front of 9 men at a table, you tell me in front of 9 men at a table. That is not a secretary." "No," Emmerich said. "It is not." Undine was quiet. Out beyond the window the light had changed, and the rain had finally stopped, and somewhere below them on Salter Row, somebody was pulling up a shutter. "I would want the lamp," she said. "It is in the car." Her eyebrows went up a fraction, which on her was an enormous thing. "You brought my lamp. It was on when I found you," he said, and could not go on with that sentence, and did not have to. She let out a long breath, and reached over with her good hand, and turned the folded page face down on the blanket, which was as close as Undine Fell was ever going to come to tearing something up. "Then I will need a chair," she said. "A proper one. Casimir brought his own in, and I have been jealous for 6 years." Emmerich laughed. It came out rough and unpracticed, and it startled both of them. "You will have the chair. And the shoes stay," she said, and closed her eyes, and was asleep inside a minute, with her hand lying open on the blanket. And Emmerich Castor sat beside her, in a room that smelled of nothing at all, and did not move for 3 hours in case she woke and needed something, and found that he did not want to be anywhere else in the world. So there it is. He did not go back to that building for her. He went back for a signature in a safe, and he found a woman on a carpet who had been buying him time with her own hands for 6 days, and had never once mentioned it, and the letter in her fingers was not even addressed to him. That is the part that gets me. She never wanted him to know. If you love a story where the quiet one turns out to be the strongest person in the room, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and tell me down in the comments what you would have done with Ivo, because I am not sure I would have been as merciful as Emmerich was. See you in the next one.